Raider Nation, what's good? Jesse Merrick here. I'm fired up, and I know you guys are too, because week 1 of the NFL season is finally here. We made it, and with that in mind, I'm really excited about today's episode, because we're not wasting any time. We're diving right into the matchup with the New England Patriots. Yeah, right out of the gates. That's how we do it here. Now, we got our guy Taylor Kyles stopping by. He's the Patriots beat reporter for CLNS Media out there in New England. Taylor is a football guy in every sense of the word, and I had a ton of fun talking ball with him. We dive into a ton of things. In our conversation, we hit on the key matchups in this game, how Josh McDaniels will try to attack Pete Carroll and the Patrick Graham defense there that they got rolling, how the Pats could also try to stop Brock Bowers and the Raiders offense as well, and so much more. So, without further ado, let's get into it. All right, Taylor, thanks for joining us, man. Let's just dive right into it, all right? You've been there at Patriots practice throughout camp, all that stuff. The regular season's finally here. We get to talk about real football. I know you're fired up for that. What's your take on the Patriots? Because here with this matchup in week 1, we got two teams coming off of 4-win seasons with a bunch of newness on both sides of the ball. So, like, after what you've seen over the last month plus, are the Patriots going to be any good? Because I know a lot of us are wondering the same thing about the Raiders as well.
I think bare minimum, they're going to be respectable. And that's really the Mike Vrabel effect, right? He brings, unlike Gerard Mayo last season, where obviously he had way too much on his plate, but Mike Vrabel's a guy who's done it before. And he's already won Coach of the Year for being able to take a team that had like a record number of IR guys and then still being able to be competitive, get them to the playoffs, all those things. So, there's a brand of toughness, a brand of just respect for the game and love for the game that's going to translate on the field. And you see that from Vrabel himself. This is a guy who's going to offense, defense, special teams, around giving his perspective because he wants this team to play football like those old school Patriots and like Mike Vrabel's Tennessee teams where he always kind of shoos away the Belichick comparisons. And I get it because he never coached under Belichick. But, best for the team, putting guys in position to succeed, just the tough element that we've always had from those Belichick coach teams have carried over, more empathy involved. And you can tell there's the team feels much closer. Like even today, I saw like a running back sitting with the offensive lineman, and I was like, oh, wow, that's something I've seen in my other 2 years on the beat. So it just feels like there's more interconnectedness. But of course, that's all great. How is it going to translate on the field? That's the important thing. There are still some questions for this Patriots team. I'm sure we'll go into some, but just kind of off the top of my head, left guard and center are two spots that I'm a little bit iffy on still. I'll also say safety. There's been a lot of change in safety for the Patriots over the past week plus. So that's a position group I'm still a little up in the air on. And Christian Gonzalez is a guy who hasn't been active since early in training camp, and he isn't practicing right now as they prepare for the Raiders. So there's some legitimate questions still. Christian Barmore also didn't play in the preseason, is expected to be a potential game wrecker for them, but he's slimmed down and hasn't played. And when he did play last season, obviously, because of the blood clots, he wasn't himself. So there are a lot of question marks. Like I thought there was 13 winnable games for the Patriots on this schedule. A lot of that had to do with the roster as well and the coaching staff that they put together. But the players at the end of the day have to get it done. And I can have all the confidence in Mike Vrabel, Terrell Williams, Josh McDaniels, but I do want to see how certain aspects of this team actually execute once they're against other stars.
Yeah, definitely. And a lot of things you said there are things that a lot of Raiders fans feel about just the newness and the fact that Pete has brought this team together, the energy around this group. And again, does it translate to wins? Like that's the $1 million question there. You bring up Josh McDaniels. Raiders fans, our ears are ringing when they hear that name because obviously it didn't go great. What do you think he brings as an offensive coordinator, stepping back into that role and obviously in familiar territory as well? Like, what do you expect out of the offense?
I think the best thing for Josh McDaniels in the NFL is when he gets to take a step back. When it's not his team, he doesn't have to be the CEO because people kind of talk about head coach and offensive coordinator like they're the same thing. Coaches will tell you they are completely different jobs. One is like a CEO, one is more like a manager where you're actually able to interact with people versus, talking to reporters and like how little actually game planning and things like that there are that are involved being a head coach. It's more managing personalities, managing your own personality, like making sure you're someone that people want to get behind. And I think when Josh is doing that for an entire team, he struggles. And I think that that's where the cracks start to form, which is why I understand people being very skeptical about him coming back to New England with a quarterback like Drake May, how there were some inconsistencies with Vegas's offense. But at the same time, it is a proven system, right? You need a guy who can execute it at a certain level. I also think that there's a degree to it where maybe I think the difficulties of the McDaniel system can hurt guys. Like if you're just throwing players out there and the system's already in place, it's very hard to adjust for someone who isn't very comfortable in it, especially with the quarterback. But for a guy like Drake May, who is very cerebral, hasn't been perfect this summer, but I have kind of been blown away by his ability to play on time, not throw into bad windows, protect the football, which has been a big area of emphasis for him. And he hasn't been quite as aggressive at times as I wanted, but I mean, there's growing pains, right? This is a second-year quarterback in an offense that's predicated around running the space, right? You're not running the route the way it's drawn. You are trying to attack space and leverage. And that's where, I asked Drake May last year about how he sees defenses. That's what he said. Like, I don't want you to just run strict routes. I want you to be a football player. And that's literally Josh's offense is catered to that. It's complicated, but once you get it, it's okay. I'm running the space. It's easier to go quickly and play with pace because you use one word and every single person knows exactly what they're supposed to do. So I think he's also done a good job of making sure he's not overloading the young players he has because they have veterans, but there's also Kyle Williams, Efton Chisholm, guys who are newer to the system and should contribute, but you can't just throw it all on their plate immediately. So I do think there's some humility there from Josh and knowing I can't overload these guys. He said it multiple times. And there's even the element of him adapting, I think, to Drake May, knowing playbook's wide open. As long as Drake, is comfortable and everyone else around him is, you can do almost anything you want because of the arm and because of the athleticism. So a proven system for Josh, and also one that I think we've seen is very hard to defend when it's at his peak. And I think we've seen glimpses of that, even though obviously it's still coming.
Yeah, definitely. And one of the things that I think is a big concern for a lot of Raiders fans is their coverage on the back end in the secondary. A lot of question marks, like a talented group, but a widely unproven one. They bring in Eric Stokes, and he's going to be the number one guy on the outside. And a lot of people are wondering, like, okay, like this is kind of a reclamation project for him. Does he come into his own, And then also you've got Darian Porter, a rookie out of Iowa State, who's got all the tools and looks like Pete Carroll made him in a lab. He's that rangy type of corner. But again, just raw, super raw, making the transition from receiver to corner. So like people are a little worried about coverage wise what it's going to look like. Specifically in the second preseason game against the 49ers, Brock Purdy and that top offense, we're kind of carving them up. So what's your take on just what this passing attack can present? Because the thing that stuck out to me, like you said, this Josh McDaniels offense goes and attacks space, and Patrick Graham over the years has had kind of that like loose coverage, the very loose zones. So what do you think is going to be their strength in terms of going up against this Raiders defense?
TreVeyon Henderson's name just keeps flashing in my brain because that's what it's going to be. And when you see Josh McDaniels attack these Pete Carroll, Patrick Graham type systems, I think Graham historically uses a lot less man coverage than Pete Carroll, where he uses a ton of 3 and 1. I know it's more going to be zone coverage with Patrick Graham, but it's going to be high lows all day. Like play action. If we pull the guard, are your guys going to be disciplined? And as much as I love me some of Landon Roberts, like we go. But at the same time, you do not want a Landon Roberts, Devin White, or Jermaine Pratt being guys that are covering anything that's going on behind them. Or even with a speedy back like Henderson, if they're moving sideline to sideline on a pitch, on outside zone, it's one cutback, and it's going to be really hard for those guys to be able to recover. So my big thing for the Patriots offensive game plan, obviously, pay very close attention to Max Crosby. You have to use a lot of play action, extra blockers, get the ball out on time. That's going to be up to Drake May. But I really see TreVeyon Henderson giving these guys a lot of problems. If they play man, it's going to be a nightmare. But even still, being able to, because Patrick Graham mixes in the spot, but also some match coverages, if his guys are just reading vertical routes and they're trying to carry the tight ends or the Pop Douglases of the world, you can send to TreVeyon Henderson or even like an Antonio Gibson. It's a stacked backfield. Even his check down options, that's pretty scary when you've got 8 yards of space and then one of these guys just trying to move the chains and then being able to do what they do after the catch. So my big thing, and I think the receiving core for the Patriots is still coming together, like Matt Collins and Kayshon Boutte are really building chemistry with Drake May as outside presences. Stephon Diggs hasn't been as productive in team drills, but you see the flashes of like, oh my God, he's still got it. Like this dude tore his ACL almost half a year ago, and he's still routing guys up in one-on-one. So I think the receivers will definitely, it'll be more of a spread the ball kind of situation. But if you want a guy that the Raiders need to circle and be like, don't let this guy beat us, like when he's on the field, we need to know what he's doing. That's TreVeyon Henderson because he can line up anywhere, do quite literally anything as a runner, as a receiver, as a pass blocker. And I do not see the Raiders having the guys in the spine of their defense to be able to handle him. And he might be their best offensive weapon as well.
Yeah, no, that's a good take. I've seen some of what his work, what he did in the preseason. They're obviously an electric player, and when Josh McDaniels does have a guy like that, he can do some interesting things. And I think Patrick Graham's going to send the blitz a lot more than he has in years past. With this particular team and this scheme, the big thing is going to be like, are their blitzes going to be correct? Like, because that was an issue for them the first preseason game. They weren't getting their fits right. They weren't tackling well. They weren't able to set the edge. All those different things. So like, it's almost like a Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde type of thing with this Raiders defense. Are they going to be able to tackle well? I think is a massive thing. Obviously, that's football, but like setting the edge, particularly against this team, and the simple fact that there's so much new on both sides, of this matchup, but so much familiarity too. That I think is such an intriguing thing with Josh McDaniels knowing a lot of the personnel on this defense so well, even though there are, some new faces, but particularly the guys up front. Now, you did mention the offensive line, particularly, you said center and guard, I believe, right? How do you feel that group tries to attack this defensive front?
I think it's going to be a lot of four-man rushes, a lot of trying to get upfield, because that's like the Mike Vrabel system. He's not trying to blitz. You're going to get creepers, which are creepers and simulated pressure. So simulated pressure is when you want to make it look like you're blitzing, but you actually only send four. A creeper pressure is you don't send any kind of pre-snap look that you're going to blitz or no tells, but you end up sending four with that fourth rusher or sometimes even the third and fourth being off-ball players. So a safety, a slot corner, a linebacker. That's really what we've seen from this defense is they're going to trust their four-man rush because you just paid Milton Williams a lot of money, paid Christian Barmore a lot of money a couple years ago. Harold Landry's making more than some people might think he deserves, but he's coming off a great summer. Caleb Chason, former Raider, building on that positive momentum from the end of last season. The guy took Keon White's starting job after a very good summer. On top of that is going to be a game day captain. I'm sure being a former Raider has to do with it, but also Mike Vrabel specifically mentioned it was because of his defense and special teams contributions. So I think you trust, and then you got Keon White as well. I think Elijah Ponder is a guy who flashed this summer. I don't know how much he's going to play on defense, but even still, like that defensive front is going to be very difficult, I think, to block consistently because even one of those guys can make difference-making plays. So not going to be a whole lot of, I think, trickery necessarily in terms of like sending all these crazy looks. They have the personnel to do it. I just don't know if they're going to necessarily set that out so early. But I think it's going to be wanting to get upfield and just sending your four rushers, sometimes unconventional, sometimes not, and seeing if they can really get it done. Because again, Vrabel's not really a big blitz guy. He wants to send a lot of people into coverage and just be able to trust his front to get it.
Interesting. Yeah. And so I'm curious then too, with that in mind, Brock Bowers obviously going to be a big thing that they're going to be circling, trying to slow down. How do you think they go about attacking him? And I know Christian Gonzalez probably factors into that, but it's a weird situation with him, like you noted.
Yeah, so this is the really big thing on me for the Patriots defense. Obviously, Brock Bowers. Like Ashton Jeanty is going to be like 1B. It's got to be Bowers 1A because he can kill you through the air. Now, I was initially thinking that Christian Gonzalez would be great on third downs. Like I like the Raiders receiving core, but there's not that wide receiver one, right? We all love Jacoby. Probably more of a top tier, very good wide receiver two. Was Amari Cooper signed specifically because of Dante Thornton, just to give him a little more leeway to learn behind the scenes?
That's my take on how things initially. I was like, okay, maybe this is in response to the Jacoby thing. And then I really sat back and thought about it. And I was like, the last couple of weeks of camp, the connection just wasn't there between Geno and Dante Thornton. So it's very clear that they aren't liking the development of him. So yeah, he's going to come in. He's going to, I think, take a lot of the X reps, from Dante Thornton on the outside there. I think that's something they're going to do right away. Even both Pete and their GM, John Spicek, talked about that, like he's going to be a big part of what they do week one. So I think we're going to see a ton of Amari Cooper lined up outside in that particular role.
Yep, and all respect for Amari Cooper, but we know he is a shell of his former self. So there isn't really that wide receiver one where Gonzo, it's like, all right, he's going to follow him all game. So I was thinking, okay, you play him to one side maybe throughout or put him on the boundary or whatever. And then Brock Bowers, because that's the guy that scares you the absolute most. Gonzalez, as I said, has not practiced yet this week. So I could see that job if they decide to use a corner, which would be a bit different for Vrabel's defense. That feels more of a Belichickian thing, but we'll see what happens. I wouldn't mind seeing a Carlton Davis. He's long, obviously very physical. I worry about him covering Brock Bowers as a route runner. I'm not going to lie, because guys who can go sideways to sideways really well scare me with Carlton Davis, and I think Brock Bowers is that kind of guy. My ideal matchup would probably be Marte Mapu, the linebacker, converted safety, because he looks like he's asleep covering tight ends half the time. Like, he is such a freak athlete. Again, he was a safety. In this defense, he really more fits the mold of a linebacker. He's put on some weight, so he's like 230, but he's long. very fast, has great explosiveness. It would be a test because I don't think he's covered somebody like a Brock Bowers before. But I think that's probably the Patriots' best case scenario. We know they want to play man coverage, but if it's Jalen Hawkins and Craig Woodson against Brock Bowers, I think they're good players. I don't like that matchup. The only guy I think who has the athleticism is Mapu. Maybe Del Pettis, who's more of a special teamer, but also even the coaches have acknowledged he does some good things in man coverage situations. Was solid last year against George Kittle in like week 4 or something like that when he hadn't played many defensive snaps. But frankly, without Christian Gonzalez, I don't love any of their answers for Brock Bowers. And if we're talking about not man coverage, I am hoping they play a lot of too high zones if they're going to play zone coverage. Because if you're playing 3 sky or whatever, where that down safety is close to the line of scrimmage, I don't like the idea of Brock Bowers being able to sneak behind your linebackers and do whatever he wants. That is my nightmare. So cover 4, take away the seams, the in cuts, maybe some buzz so you can get a safety to drop down over some crossing routes or whatever you think is going to be the biggest threat in that moment. Just have safeties and defenders with depth over the top of him, because I swear, man, if he pops off for like 80 yards and it's all against zone coverage because the linebackers didn't know where he was because of the scheme, I'm going to lose my damn mind. So hopefully they make sure they have eyes on him from pretty far back to get on top and contest anything downfield. And then again, man coverage, either Marte Mapu, who's your best coverage linebacker, safety-ish player, or a cornerback who you trust to be able to hang with him in those passing situations.
That's interesting for sure. And I think so. We heard Chip talk early on in training camp about how Brock was used back in college at Georgia, the way they moved him around so much. We've seen it a lot at practice. Like, he's going to be used in so many different ways, lined up outside in the slot, and that traditional tight end role, also as an H-back. I'm sure we'll see him in the backfield at times. Like, he is going to be everywhere. They're going to do whatever they can to hide him. Yeah. So the defense is going to be tasked with, it's going to be a whole where's Waldo thing. And they're going to be able to hide him really well. I think we are going to see a ton of crossers too out of this offense. That was something that I think a lot of fans got frustrated with. We didn't see a ton of those crossing routes when Josh McDaniels was in town. You know, it was just kind of strange. Like, so many times we were like, we need to see more of that, and we just didn't. You know,
trail they've been spamming this summer, and that's like kind of his thing. It's really weird.
Yeah, it was strange. So we were just like, there's times when it's like, this is when it's called for, and you didn't quite see it. We were like, what the hell is going on here? You know, so it's just strange. But so that's obviously the 1A. The 1B, you mentioned Ashton Jeanty, obviously. We'd be crazy to not talk about him. This front 7 from the Patriots against Ashton Jeanty, what's your take on that matchup?
It worries me a little bit because Milton Williams, for as great as he is as a pass rusher, and actually earlier in his career, his numbers as a run defender were fantastic. Last year it flipped, where he wasn't very good against the run, but broke out as this elite pass rusher. We've seen the pass rushing, and there's been flashes of, when he gets upfield, he's really good. But if you concentrate a double team on Milton Williams, I worry about his ability to hold up to that consistently. Now, to be fair, I think the edges are very firm. I think, Caleb on Chason thought of as a pass rusher, but is a very well-rounded player, and he can defend the run in his own right. Harold Landry has been one of the better edge-setting defenders in the league on top of giving you some pass rush juice. And if Barmore's healthy, he can do whatever the hell he wants. So then you also have Kyrus Tonga, who's their main nose tackle. Really came in and we were thinking he's a space eater. He's going to be that guy who kind of takes up a lot of attention to free up a Milton Williams or a Christian Barmore. But he's also shown some pass rush upside, which is interesting. So when you see big 95 on the field, he's not the generic nose tackle. Like, he's actually got a little bit more juice than you might expect. But I also think that Robert Spillane might be able to make up for quite a few of any deficiencies there are up front, because he got such great instincts, doesn't take bad angles, you have a lot of missteps. Like, he's going to be where the ball carrier is. It's just going to be a matter of them creating enough disruption that he can rally along with Christian Ellis, Mapu, whomever else is next to him, and be able to get to the ball carrier. I'll also say that tackling is an area I thought the Patriots are pretty consistent in this preseason. Mike Vrabel brought it up a few times, but that was a game where, I think only the third stringers were missing tackles. I think maybe Duggar had a bad angle, so I'm thinking, okay, he's serious about this, and it feels like a Patriots team where you're not going to have guys just whiffing left and right, and that makes you feel good week 1 because, like you said, it's hard enough for a defense to even be in shape to do that, much less if they're not coached to do it, and it's going to be an issue throughout the season. So I'm encouraged by the tackling, but also we know Ashton Jeanty. I was hoping the Patriots would seriously consider taking him potentially over Will Campbell, because the guy just doesn't go down, and we saw it in the preseason, dragging players. I don't care what his stat line said. So I think that it's going to be a tough test, but I think if they can minimize Milton Williams a little bit and maybe some of his streakiness, I think they should hold up pretty well, especially with Craig Woodson and Jalen Hawkins at safety. With this quarter scheme, a lot more run responsibilities, they are not afraid to fill. Woodson is firing down there, wants to get involved in the mess. So I think they've got the guys to do it. But again, it's week one, man. You can never predict what a run defense is going to look like. So I would say I'm cautiously optimistic.
Yeah, well, and Jeanty's like a caged animal. Like, he's ready to go. We've talked about it so many times. It's like you don't really get a chance to see his game flourish in practice because obviously they're not playing with the same level of physicality. And so, like, those little small bursts in the preseason, and I know he wanted more carries, and it's just like, all right, you're getting a glimpse of it, and now let's see what this guy can do, over the course of an entire game, late in the third quarter, wearing a defense down. It's going to be really intriguing. And that matchup between Spillane and Jeanty, I cannot wait to see the first collision between those guys. That's going to be like the old school, the Spillane against Derrick Henry, when obviously Spillane got the better of him. I remember talking with him about that when he was here. It's going to be interesting. I cannot wait to see who wins in that matchup. It's going to be so exciting to watch.
Have you heard the stuff that's come out since then? Because there were a couple good nuggets we got. Okay, so Mike Vrabel, there was a mic'd up where he went up and kind of gave Spillane crap about that. He's like, since you had Derrick, you didn't really want to tackle anymore. Spillane's like, what are you talking about? You trying to piss me off? Like, he got rattled. And then they asked him about it. I think it was on Bussin' with the Boys. And I think he admitted that he got concussed and couldn't see. He was like, yeah, my vision disappeared. And I was basically listening to people on where to go. Because at that point, he can't just come out of the game. This is a guy who's trying to earn a roster spot or a role on the team. So, yeah, we've got some interesting nuggets. Vrabel did not forget, and Spillane clearly didn't either because that play jacked him up. Hopefully he fares better against you.
Yeah, no, Spillane's a madman. I know Raider Nation is so pissed that he's not on the team anymore. And then to have to see him week one, oh, God. That's not going to be fun to watch.
Last Spillane nugget, I'm so sorry, because he is a very...
No, I love this. I'm here for it.
Have you heard about the blindfolded thing?
No.
That man trains blindfolded at linebacker. So when his introductory press conference, obviously he's buzzing under throws, getting his hands on passes, always around the ball. So I'm it seems like you're very productive at linebacker. Do you do anything to work on your spatial awareness? And he goes, yeah, I train blindfolded. And then
Crazy.
Also Chad Graff at The Athletic, he told him about how he hikes barefoot and will go up the trail once to memorize it, then do it again with no shoes on backwards. And he's like, yeah, sometimes I run into stuff, but hey, you learn. And it's just this dude is out of his mind, but hey, it worked. He got his big money contract. He's a captain. It's working for him, but Robert Spillane is genuinely
he's doing something right. He and Mac Hollins, match made in heaven with the bare feet for sure. That's hilarious. You did talk about the safeties a bit. I want to get more into that because obviously there's a lot of interesting stuff going on back there with the Pats in that area. Talk to me more about that group, what you like about the guys that remain, and then I do want to get into Jabrill Peppers after because there's been some talk, people trying to say, hey, should the Raiders look at him? But we'll get to that in a sec. But I want to get your take on the guys that remain after all the carnage on the back end there.
So the starters are going to be Jalen Hawkins and Craig Woodson. Craig Woodson was a 4th-round pick. Jalen Hawkins was on the team last year. He was actually one of their first re-signings, which I thought was pretty interesting because I thought he was fine last year, but to be fair, didn't have a whole lot of help from the coaching staff and the whole situation. So you kind of give everybody a mulligan a bit. But he's got good range, very smart, very communicative. I thought he might be a captain. He'd been voted captains in some other situations, but I don't know if I necessarily consider him a playmaker, but he's the guy who kind of coordinates everything and gets everybody in line, which we know is very valuable because, you can overlook those guys, but then as soon as you don't have them, all these coverage busts like the Patriots had last year, and it's well, what's going on? Communication was poor. Another guy who the Patriots love for his communicative ability is Craig Woodson, a guy who was more of a strong safety in his time at Cal. He was there for 4 or 5 years, a guy with a ton of experience. His last season transitioned to free safety, where there was a lot more Hawkins, a lot more telling people what to do, getting everybody in line and those things. So between the experience and the fact that in college at Cal, they were doing everything disguising coverages, playing man, playing zone. He's done just about everything, and it's just been a matter of getting up to speed with this system. I think he's looked really good. Hasn't been perfect, but he doesn't make a lot of the mistakes where you're like, geez, maybe we shouldn't play this guy. There's a little bit of speed bumps and things, but nothing egregious. And if anything, I thought he made more plays even than I was expecting during the preseason. So those are your two headliners. Kyle Duggar is still on the team. Now, the whole Kyle Duggar chronicle has been that last year, it goes all the way back there. He suffered an ankle injury, I believe, in week 4. And it was a pretty significant one. He missed some time, then came back around midseason. Clearly wasn't the same. Even before that, he had been making some mental mistakes. Again, I do not think the defense was very well coached, so I don't like to put a ton of that on the players. was a bit of a mess. And then when he came back, didn't look the same. He looked like a tick slow, wasn't processing things as quickly. It just felt like when teams had big plays, he was around there a lot. Wasn't always his fault, but he was around the ball. So it's like, what's going on? He played on the injured ankle. It kept getting worse. And like all credit to Kyle Duggar, man. You're on a losing team with terrible, terrible vibes.
Just keep going, yeah.
And you're toughing it out, man. He did the best he could, and I really admire him for it. But then he had offseason surgery. Missed the entire spring along with Jabrill Peppers, which I think nobody really expected how big of a deal that'd be at the time. It's like, oh, these are veterans, they'll figure it out. I think that had a massive effect because when you ask people about Duggar, they kept talking about the spring. They kept talking about communication, how important that is at safety. So I think it took him a while to not only figure out what to do in this new system. Think about it, he'd been in one system his entire career. So he's learning a brand new defense while also recovering from the ankle injury. And he wasn't making plays in camp. It was like it was kind of like Peppers, except he made fewer plays where he's competitive, like he's not getting burned all the time. But Duggar's always been a boom bust player. And it's like when you're giving up first downs and red area touchdowns, but you're not getting your hands on passes, it starts to kind of, the equation gets a little murky there. Started looking better in the last couple weeks of the preseason, to his credit. And I think that's a somewhat significant reason for why he's still on the team. I also don't think he could get traded. His contract is just very, very difficult to get rid of. And I think the Pats were like, why are we going to get rid of this guy, pay all this money for what, a 7th round pick to give a player that might actually be able to contribute for us? And if Duggar's healthy, he's better than Hawkins. So you'd hope that he works his way into the lineup at some point. But right now, he's a backup. He was actually Jeremy Chin today in practice. He was rocking the number 11. So very much a backup on the scout team. But like as a third, there's no better third safety in the NFL, obviously. Like if he is continuously healthier and continues to understand what this system's asking of him, and he really did look good at times, maybe he starts to slide into the lineup there. Last guy at the safety position is Del Pettis. Kind of mentioned him earlier. More of a special teams player, but honestly, the way he plays reminds me of Peppers. And like he's really a lot of energy, very feisty, physical, loves playing the run, like sticks his nose in there. So not the same playmaker, obviously, like Jabrill Peppers is a very special talent, special player cerebrally. But Pettis, even before Peppers got cut, I was like, it's gonna give me some Jabrill vibes. So it's still an unproven safety room in the sense that this is a new defense with a rookie and 2 veterans who are in a brand new defense. How exactly is that going to work? So again, like I mentioned, how that's one that is still up in the air for me. I have good expectations. Like I think there are some quality players, but we also have to see how this meshes in a defense that it's a lot more quarters, a lot more shifting schemes and things like that. So they have to be on the same page, play after play. We'll see if they can actually.
Interesting. And yeah, I want to get into Peppers there because you mentioned Jeremy Chin, and the Patrick Graham really seems to like this big nickel package where they roll Chin down into the slot. What do you think about Jabrill? And I know I saw some of your stuff. I know you said he played in the slot a lot, throughout camp and stuff like that. What do you like about him now, Jabrill Peppers, in 2025 as that third safety, the first guy off the bench in the high slot role or high safety role there?
So with Jabrill, another thing to acknowledge, like when I mentioned the injury last year, Jabrill had a knee injury early in the year. Then was suspended. He was accused of domestic violence. Also had drugs. Was acquitted of domestic violence, but like he still got popped with drugs, which is not nothing. But that forced him to miss the rehab that he would have gotten if he were in the facility. He wasn't allowed to be anywhere near the team until he was. I don't know if he's on the exempt list, but there was some situation where he couldn't even be in the building. So the knee injury never really got better. You could still see he was a step behind. He also missed the entire spring. And I think you saw that physically, like there's a bad missed tackle he had against the Giants. Not that's one play, but it felt like a bit of a microcosm of what they might have been concerned about with Peppers in a deep role. So the Patriots, I've always loved him as a center fielder. It's where he made a lot of his plays, even though I feel like people always said he needed to be closer to the line. Because he's still, and this is why I love him now, and why he was in the slot, he's still a formidable slot defender. Not in man coverage. I remember I used to make fun of the Giants for being like, hey, Jabrill Peppers, cover Cooper Kupp. Like, what are we doing here?
Crazy.
That's insane. And like, he's too small to cover tight ends as well. He's feisty. Like, he's got the technique and all that down. But at the end of the day, he's like 5'10", 5'11", and these tight ends are running 6'4" plus at least. It's just at that point, it's physics. So I don't like him in man coverage unless it's against a running back or as a spy. But if you want him blitzing off the slot and run situations, that's where he made a lot of his money, was getting in the backfield, kind of condensing that edge where people wanted to run, especially on outside zone, and just clogging things up. As a guy who reroutes in zone coverage, obviously as physical as he is, his instincts to buzz underneath things. I remember an interception he had a couple years ago where Josh Allen didn't even see him and he just buzzed right under something on 3rd and long and picked it off. That's what Jabrill still does well. If you want to buzz him down and, have him as more of a robber or 3 buzz guy to play over the middle and make some plays, he can do that. I just don't love the idea of him going backwards or covering bigger, more athletic players in man coverage. Those are the areas where I'm like, he's persona non grata there, but those are very specific roles. And in a zone-heavy defense that's going to play a lot of big nickel, might put him in that slot role. I think that's the kind of system where, yes, he can absolutely still be valuable to a team for the next 2-3 years if he's able to have a more defined.
Interesting. I like that. Man, Taylor, I've taken up a ton of your time, so we'll get out of here on this one. What happens this weekend and why?
That's tough, man, because I have a lot of respect for Geno Smith. It's more that the lack of threatening receivers kind of worries me. And Josh McDaniels is one of the only offensive coordinators I trust to take a bunch of twos and really do something with them. But of course, there's also Brock Bowers. If the Patriots listen to me and make sure they have
hopefully they're listening right now. Yeah.
If they have their attention locked on Bowers and they can contain Ashton Jeanty, I do think there's a possibility of a comfortable lead, especially because even on the Raiders defense, like Max Crosby and Malcolm Kuntz or like Adam Butler, I feel like he doesn't get nearly enough love. He's been a really good player for them. That defensive line is legit, but the depth for the Raiders worries me. And while there are concerns as well for the Patriots, I just feel like they at least have 1 or 2 players at each spot where you're like, all right, they should be solid, right? Like they shouldn't get embarrassed. So I respectfully, because of Pete Carroll and Geno Smith, I think it'll be a close game, but I do have the Patriots coming out on top. Home field advantage. Again, I just like how solid they are across the board, but it's the reason where when they play other teams kind of down the stretch where they're more stacked, that's where I'm going to get a little bit more worried. But I think this is one of those early games. Maybe they get some confidence under their belts. But I mean, also if Geno Smith does what he did last year in Gillette Stadium and just locks in and starts picking them apart once he figures out the game plan, like there's only so much you can do. So I'm hoping they get a decent lead so Geno can't get the ball last and win. If he does, if Geno gets the ball last, I think the Raiders pull this one.
All right. Hey, we'll see what version of Geno shows up. Taylor, as we get out of here, what can people expect to see from you and where can they find your work?
Yeah, thank you so much for having me, brother. This was a blast, really. You can find me on YouTube at Patriots Press Pass. That's where I have my show Patriots Daily. We're going to have all our pre-Raider stuff coming out there. Also, my written stuff will be at clnsmedia.com under my name, Taylor Kyle. So those are the big ones there.
Awesome, Taylor. You're the man. I appreciate you. Thanks for your time.
Thank you so much, Jesse. It was fun.
Yeah, Taylor's the man. Go check him out on Twitter at TKyles39. He's always dropping interesting nuggets. And as you now know, the dude definitely knows ball. Obviously, you're all hoping that he's wrong about his game prediction, but we'll just have to see how it all shakes out in New England this weekend. If you didn't already know, I'll be on the road out there in Foxborough for the opener. So make sure you're tapped into the Silver and Black Sports Network for all of your Raiders coverage from New England. I can't wait to get out there. It's going to be a good time. But before we get there, keep an eye out for our next episode dropping on Thursday at 11 a.m. Can't give any teasers on our guest for that day, but I do have something in the works with a great friend of the program, so stay tuned if I can lock him down. And as I always mention, if you're not already subscribed to our newsletter, head to silverandblacksportsnetwork.com and subscribe. You can sign up for free. That's our free version, which gets you our Friday edition of the newsletter, or for just $6 a month, only $6. Come on. You'll gain access to all 3 of our newsletters dropping on Monday, Wednesday, and Fridays at 6 a.m. Good stuff there. And make sure you do like and subscribe to this podcast wherever you are listening to us. If you like what you heard, hit us with a 5-star review and leave a comment for us as well. Those things help a ton. We'll be back out of practice on Wednesday, catching up with Geno, Pete, and the whole crew because the locker room is finally open to all of us for the first time. I cannot wait to get the players' insight on the opener and start talking ball with all these guys. In the meantime, though, that's all we got for you today. As always, guys, we appreciate you watching and listening, and we'll catch you next time.